Hi, my name is Ian McClarty, and I'm president of Phoenix Snap. With me today is Michael Deemer from Inside Systems Engineer with Veeam. Today we'll be covering the age of RaaS, Ransomware-as-a-Service, and also how to stay ahead of it. Before we begin, we'd like to get a little bit of polling questions out there, get some audience participation. The first one is, how confident are you in your company's defense against ransomware? A is very confident, B is quite confident, C is not sure, and D is confident. We'll take a couple seconds here to answer. And then what we'll do is also we'll show the results from the polls. Okay, let's display the poll. Good. Let's go with a quick poll of number 2. How often does your company back up its data? A, every 12 hours, B, daily, C, weekly, D, monthly, or E, not sure. Give a couple of seconds here. And let's go ahead and share the poll questions. So it looks like a lot of daily and a lot of weekly backups. Every hour, every 2 hours is intensive to do. So what is Ransomware-as-a-Service and how has it evolved? So if we step back and we look at the slide on the left-hand side, typically ransomware operators were very much a one-to-one relationship. They picked out the victim they wanted to do. They typically built the software themselves or used a set of open source tools or a combination of both, and they went after the attack. They did the ransomware on their own. It's very time intensive for them, and they got a little bit of cash off of that. Once they started getting cash and they started actually getting the cryptocurrencies going, they started to want to scale this thing out. So what they did was create a business model around this, which is very unfortunate for the market, because what that means is there's more volume now. And so the way that works today is that you have a RaaS operator that really is more of a technology company. What they're doing is developing better and better ransomware tools, software around that, delivery mechanisms, and then they use an affiliate network. And the affiliate network is basically the interaction point. They're the ones that are doing the delivery of the phishing attacks. They're the ones that are actually getting the ransomware out to the victims. And the victims typically are corporations, large enterprises, government entities, utility companies, and they go after them. And so by doing it this way, they've scaled out and they've been able to do more attacks. And we'll share some data and information with you shortly around that. But one piece that we're not showing that is also part of this whole logistical ecosystem is that they also have a way to recuperate funds through money, through exchanges. And typically we hear a lot of crypto going on, but there's always a third middleman in the mix as well that handles the money. The RaaS operators, they like this because it gives them the ability to be able to extend their functionality out to be able to get their code out more, be able to focus on their code stack. And then they also are kind of shielded, they're protected more because there's buffers of people in front of them to take the fall. And so they also do this for scale out. If in a typical model, the ransomware affiliate, they recover about 75% of the actual transaction. So the RaaS operator takes 25% cut for the software development code. They give that out to the different affiliates that they have, and then and it's only paid on a successful penetration and successful payment. So it's to no risk at all to the operator by doing this. So how much has the RaaS attacks increased over the last year? If you compare previous year to this year, from last year's closing, we're looking at about a 60% increase in ransomware attacks in the last 18 months increase, which is significant. I mean, we're seeing more volume, and again, the volume is really created because now there's a whole network of individuals doing this as a business model. And one thing I didn't mention was that the transactions on average tend to be about 250,000 per successful collection of attack. So when the ransom is paid, it's typically about $250,000 engagement every time they do this. So it is very lucrative business for them to continue to do this. The RaaS groups have also grown. There's been more and more as the word gets out that this is actually a very successful venture to do. we are going to see more increases of groups. I mean, last year, if you're looking at 62.3% increase from their numbers, and I would dare to say that this year is going to be even much higher than that. I mean, we're just seeing a compounding effect here. And we're also seeing specialization, unfortunately, right? So before, it was an operator would have to do everything on their own, and now affiliates are getting better at being affiliates. Software developers that are doing ransomware are getting better at doing that piece. The exchanges are getting better at collecting the money in a way that they can't be tracked. And so each group is stepping up their game and also doing scale out along the way. So it's making it a harder initiative for everybody. And ransomware strains, again, because it's a lucrative business. It's relatively easy to build the software, relatively easy to do the attack. There's been a doubling since the second half of 2021 to 2022 of new strains. And I would dare to say that this year, in 2023, we're going to see that even double even more. So now we're going to look at what where the victims really are by sector. And it's a good example of what impact this does to supply chain as well. So if you think of manufacturing firms, especially how susceptible they've been this last couple of years with COVID and all the different changes that are going on in the market, they were the #1 attack target by far. They were the easy, low-hanging fruit. They were focusing on just being able to get product out, not on securing themselves to the best of their availability. So you're talking about a workforce that is just tired along the way and not paying attention and becoming an easy attack target. So they took advantage of that. Professional services groups. So what does that mean? Think of your accounting groups. Think of your law firms. Professional services groups have data that is very valuable. That is people's proprietary data. And when that ransom goes out or they lose that data, their business is gone, 100%. And plus, also puts them in a very litigious situation with their customers, because now that data has been breached and they have to report that. So again, easy attack target, and they pay the ransoms. The one here that I'm actually not surprised, but the numbers are not high, but I know they happen a lot more, are energy utility companies. If you think about it, in Arizona, we have a handful of utility companies. We have 3, 4 maybe utility companies that are of size. In the metro alone, the Phoenix metro, we have only 2. So the numbers are pretty small. But if you look at the actual utility companies that were attacked, it's significant. I mean, if you're talking about like a whole metro only having a couple, doesn't take many to do some serious damage. So even though we're talking about low volume for utility and government and aerospace and defense, the blast radius of the lower tier here is even more valuable, right? I mean, think of like if aerospace and defense information gets out, what damage does that do to just the general market? What threat is that to a government entity? So it doesn't put us in a very good position. So the numbers are good to see from a volume perspective, but they also don't display the entire story. Top 10 ransomware groups. I'm going to focus on Lockbit a little bit, just because it's been the one that's been getting the most traction. Lockbit is an evolution of .abcd, and it started as basically a virus. So .abcd was a virus that was known to go out in 2019. It came out, and it was basically a virus that would take your files, and whenever it was a corrupted file, it would rename the extension. So instead of like a .exe file or a .pg and png or whatever the extension was, it would change it to .abcd. Well, they've decided to take that and evolve it and continue to make it better, and so it's become a very popular mainstream way to get attack vectors and basically to encrypt information and to supply a ransomware attack. So it's only I mean, if you think about 2019, it's not very old, but look at all the movement and traction it's gotten. And there's obviously variants of Lockbit and each operator and each software company that is working on the back end from as bad actors, they're adding their own secret sauce to it, or they're adding additional layers to it. So these attacks keep on evolving, and there's like different strains now, and there's different variants of these things. So we can kind of see like the Lockbit has been very popular, but there's always new entrants coming in, and the popularity raises by how efficient and how hard they are to decode. So what can you do? How can you stay ahead of this in 2023? Well, there's a couple of like high level and just better business practices you should be doing, and they help. They do help. Number one is prioritize your resilience. Having a good backup and disaster recovery plan, that's like business 101 now. I mean, it's inherent into any compliance organization. It's mandated actually by a lot of industries now. But is it followed, and is it followed well? Just saying I have backups, that's not enough a lot of times. Are you testing your backup plan? Are your backups being done in a manner that makes sense? You know, if I'm doing a backup once a month, that doesn't make a lot of sense, especially companies are so, the information now is so data rich now, companies can no longer keep up. So you have to have good ways to scale out that information and good ways to not just back it up, but also to recover it. So disaster recovery is key. What gets forgotten a lot of times and gets checked off is I have a backup plan, I'm good, I have the data, but that's not the problem. The problem is that you need the application to be active. You need your business to be able to go to your CRM solutions or your applications that are proprietary, that are built in. You need to be able to have those accessible to people. You need to have now remote workstations are a bigger issue. You need to have all those things available to your employees and to be able to actually do their job. And so a good disaster recovery plan is just a necessity, and that requires a lot of compute. And so it's very expensive for a lot of companies to do this on their own, to actually have a disaster recovery plan on their own, because it's compute that sits there as insurance. Layered security measures. So adding good, you know, if you think of security, it's like an onion. You have to continue to add layers and more layers on top of that. You know, having good penetration tests, following better business practices when it comes to patching. You know, having a system that is having proper firewalls in place, having you know, people check logs the whole time, and having them be smarter logs. Putting we hear the term DevSecOps a lot, right? Even in code, making sure that your code is written in such a way that is that has a security posture around it. There are many layers to security, but having a layered approach helps, because layer by layer, it's the effectiveness decreases. Cyber hygiene and training. This is probably the most important one, because you can have number one and number two. Number one is really your insurance. Number two is really your better business practice. Number three, though, is I would say it's one of the most critical ones, and it's probably the easiest ways that a lot of attacks are happening today. A lot of these groups, especially on the affiliate network, have become really good at sending out phishing attacks that look just like a normal email. They sound, they read, even the to field looks normal. Everything looks good, and they're collecting very basic information at first, right? So they don't seem very nefarious, but they're a good way to get credentials. And so no matter how good of a measure you have, how good security, if all these things are not working in conjunction, you're gonna miss the mark. So you have to have all three. You can't just like focus on one and say I'm good to go. You really have to let all three work in conjunction with each other. For example, I have a phishing attack that happens. My staff is trained. They report the phishing attack. Now I'm able to secure my within better automated rules. Now I'm able to not even have those attacks coming through. I can stop them at the edge. If the attack does come through, I have a really good layered security response. And so now I'm able to see that some logging that was done after hours or in times that didn't make any sense, or to entities that normally don't have access, what happened. So there's a breach. I can catch the breach as it's happening. And now if the breach continues, or I caught it later, I have a way to recover that information in a timely basis. So all three of them really work in conjunction, and they're really a necessity. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Ian. And guys, again, my name is Michael Deemer, systems engineer here for Veeam Software, and I'll be taking you through the Veeam backup and disaster recovery piece here today. But really what I want to do before I even get into my slides is kind of just go over some of the big key components that Ian was talking about. These are huge takeaways that I think everybody really just kind of needs to sink in. And one of the biggest things that I really want to drill home here today is ransomware is not going away. It's not going to go away anytime soon. This is a pain point regardless of vertical aspect of business that you're in. This is something that's just unfortunately the name of the game at this point. If you're not making the steps to procure and protect against these things, it just ultimately will get worse and worse. And I think, 250,000, I know Ian said, that's the normal going rate. For somebody that does backups all day long, 250,000 is on the low end of what I see. That's like for those small mom and pop shops. Anybody that has good amount of data and monetary flowing through that particular company, you're going to see that particular value go quite a bit higher. these ransomware targets aren't just, going in for the first week, laying dormant and getting a week's worth of data. No, they're going to lay there for weeks, months, years until they get what they want and figure out how to exploit that, right? So that's one of the biggest things that I want to talk about. And that kind of moves me right into the 3-2-1 rule. And I'll talk about the 3-2-1-0 rule, but what I really want to talk about is if you currently aren't adhering to this rule or never even heard of this policy, and you're not with Phoenix Snap and you're not with Veeam, I would take a snapshot, a screenshot, something of this particular side, just to say, hey, am I adhering to this policy? This policy isn't something that me and Phoenix Snap came up with and said, hey, this is how we're going to do things. This is a backup policy against all applications, the backup sector in general. And really, I'll break this down. So if you're the first time you're hearing about it, again, just make sure that you guys are adhering to it. If this is, something that's, very normal, great. I'm glad that you guys are used to or accustomed to the 3-2-1 rule. And we have a little bit of a spin on it, which is the 3-2-1-0. So let's kind of break this down. So we have the 3 is really going to be depicting 3 different copies of your data. In this particular sense, they're going to be VBKs. And in the Veeam sense, that's active fulls. So these are 3 active fulls of your data. Now, the 2 is actually going to represent a couple different things here. The first one being is different media. Now, that could be like an SSD or NVMe drive for quick, fast turnaround. And then we usually pair that with some other type of media like tape, for instance. And then the number 1, where does the number 1 come into play? The number 1 here is actually going to be Phoenix Snap. This is where we send our data offsite to an immutable location that we can make sure that it's not on production, right? It has these media sets that are split out, and we have 1 offsite. And this 0, what is the 0 really representing in this particular SKU? In this particular screenshot, it's really representing that we can actually go back and recover with 100% certainty as long as we use backup and replication recovery verification, which basically was a mouthful. And that is really just all boiled down to sure backup. So sure backup, I'll kind of talk a little bit later, but in hindsight, just think it's a isolated lab. So here on my next slide, what I want to show you is actually what it looks like when ransomware hits. All right, so ransomware. Let me kind of break down this slide just a little bit here. So this is pretty busy. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, so just bear with me. So on the left hand, so I'll work from the left to the right hand side. So the left-hand side, you have your hypervisor, whether that's VMware, Nutanix, or Hyper-V. And then we have our virtual machines on top, and below that we have our storage. Regardless of storage vendor, it could be Dell EMC, NetApp, HP, Nimble, Pure, whatever that may be for your actual array on the end. Now, scooting over just a little bit to that box where it says Veeam, that is going to be Veeam backup and replication. That is our core product. That's going to be backing up virtual machines, physical servers, cloud instances. Now, if you follow that green line down, that's our on-demand sandbox, aka sure backup. That's what I was kind of alluding to in the previous slide. Now, going up, we have a tape device, and we just have a regular backup target. So what actually happens when D-Day comes, right? We went to lunch, we came back, all of a sudden, you log back into your virtual machine, or the admin does in this particular sense, and sees that everything is basically in garbage. There's nothing that is legible. Everything is just completely in code. And then they're probably going to get some type of message on their screen saying, hey, if you want to be able to get your data back, it's going to cost X, Y, and Z. These are the couple different payment options I like. I like either cryptocurrency, I like gift cards, or I like some other non-traceable funds of value, right? And that's where this is going to come into play. Now, how do we actually know we have a good copy of the data? This is where sure backup comes into play. So again, the virtual machines get locked down. Those virtual machines are most of the time housing, databases, files, folders, the actual data that runs your day-to-day operations. Now, that could even be more important. It could be your SQL server. It could be a high application server where you guys make most of your money. So imagine if one of your high-end application servers go down. I know, for instance, that I know plenty of businesses, if their applications go down for 5 minutes, they're losing millions of dollars. So downtime is absolutely mission critical. So how do we know we have a good copy? We're basically going to push it back through Veeam via that that on-demand sandbox, that sure backup job. That sure backup job is going to do a couple different things: heartbeat test, ping test, and application test. And I'll go into some of the more details here in a little bit, but here on my next slide, I kind of want to show you what it looks like. So I would say typically most people kind of follow under that red line. There's nothing wrong with the red line. It's just different ways to do backups, right? So I would say typically most people are doing backups once a day, maybe twice a day, and it's at a scheduled time, maybe 8 o'clock at night, maybe 10 o'clock at night, whatever that time frame is, and that's very typical. Now, the more high-end environments definitely are going to most likely leverage some type of storage snapshots, and that really makes it a lot more easy to roll back and not really miss any type of data during data manipulation or restore times. So let's just say, hey, every day you take a backup at 8 p.m., but something happened at 11 o'clock, right before you went to lunch. What happens and can you restore? If you're using modern storage snapshots, of course, you can just roll back to the hour prior, which would be 10 o'clock, and you would only lose, the X amount of minutes from 10 o'clock to when you lost the site at 11. Now, comparatively, if you're doing just a regular backup, you're going to be losing all that time all the way back, all the way until 8 o'clock the night prior, because that's the last time we did any changes, right? Every time we do anything, we're only looking for change rate data. So pretty crazy there. Now, what I also want to show you here is on our next slide is actually what it looks like to restore. So it's going to be kind of that busy slide again. And again, not much has changed other than what we're going to do to actually restore from it. Now, we have a couple different options to know that we have a good copy. The one I just was alluding to with storage snapshots. So you can run and restore from a storage snapshot. Quick, turn and burn, cool. We're minutes, hours, whatever time frame that is set upon. And then we also have a sure backup target, right? So that sure backup target is going to be able to, making sure that it's not being able to be modified, any types of changes, decryption, or changes to those specific blocks, allowing for, again, data manipulation. An offline tape repository, very, very typical. This has been around for forever. I feel like tape is kind of that true bread and butter for offline repositories, because once it's ejected from that, either a virtual tape library or the physical tape library, there is no way to make changes. It goes into a box, it goes into an envelope, and usually gets sent out via USPS or FedEx to an offsite location. Once it's out of there, it's done. There's no changes to be made. But there's always some downside with something that's so far off site and shipping and things like that. And then what I really like the best is restoring from Cloud Connect or restoring from Phoenix Snap. This is where you can hit them up and say, hey, I have this specific issue and I do need to do a restore. There's also a self restore portal that can definitely help as well. But that's some of the big things to know that you have a restore option. Now, here on our next slide, I want to look a little more ahead to know if we're protected, right? So this side is really kind of going to be depicting more of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture in this particular instance is going to be Veeam 1. Veeam 1 is basically a monitoring and analytics warehouse. This is going to be able to know what type of ingress and degress you have. This is also going to be able to look over virtual machines that may not have a backup. Maybe you have virtual machines that are over leveraged. And what I mean by over leveraged is maybe you have a data center, right? At that data center, you have 30 virtual machines. You have 5 virtual machines running at full tilt, 24/7, 365. Prior to Veeam, you didn't know that you could do that and actually kind of spread out the resources. So that's something else to kind of note there. Veeam 1 is really just a monitoring and analytics monster for getting all that out and spit you out Visio diagrams and a whole bunch of good stuff from that kind of perspective. Now, moving along here on my next slide, really what I want to talk about is the Hardened Linux repository. Now, some of you guys may or may not have ever heard of this before. It could be hit or miss. So what I refer to this as a hard Linux repository or an immutable repository. Now, some of you guys for the first time may have heard, hey, immutable. What is immutable? So an immutable repository in a very, very high level is a physical location or an offsite location that we can shove backup data to, and we can always restore from it, but it can never be manipulated or changed once it's there. There's just a specific retention policy on it, which I'll get into in a second, that just allows for people and malicious actors and insights not to encrypt your data and delete it. That's really the name of the game here. So let me tell you on the next slide a little bit more about the Linux repository, kind of why we choose it, and kind of why it's kind of like first class when it comes to the on-premise physical location for immutable. So why is this malware proof? Well, the biggest one is this is all running Linux, right? So we're not running Microsoft. This is all Linux. Now, a lot of people always get the question, well, what version of Linux can I run? I don't have that off the top of my head just because it always is changing. But if you're running Red Hat, Debian, Ubuntu, stuff like that, these are very typical. As long as they're the most current builds, they're most likely going to be supported. And we have documentation if you're looking to kind of check and balance to see kind of what that looks like. And the other big thing is insider protection. So insider protection is basically an immutable flag, and this is the retention that I was alluding to. This immutable flag is going to allow you to basically kind of take a flag and literally put it in the sand and say, you cannot delete this. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Jeff Bezos. You're not deleting this data for the next 14, 16, or however many days or weeks or months that particular is. And that's what that really is making sure is once that immutable flag is set, it's set. There's no way to change that until the next time you have an active full. So let me kind of get a little more into the weeds here about the Linux hardened repository. The other big thing is we use a single use only hardened repository credential. This is very typical inside of the Linux world. So if we don't use root, so if you guys are very big into Linux, that's kind of like a top level credential in Windows, kind of the same type of playing field there. We use a single use only credential basically to connect to that repository, and then we burn the bridge back out. So there's no way for any type of lingering connections or things from that particular side. And the other big thing is we're using XFS. So if you want to get extra space savings, block cloning, things like that, this is another great way to save some space on-prem or in potentially in the cloud. Just kind of depends where you have it. So moving on here a little bit forward, I want to talk about archive tier. So archive tier isn't exactly new to us. It's been around for about a year now. And what we're really looking at here is in a big picture is SOBR, a scale out backup repository job. Basically how we move data from on-premise to object storage. In this particular sense, I'm going to break these kind of down. So we have our performance tier. Performance tier, think of this as a very first landing zone that we have to hit. This is spinning disk. This could be a NAS. This could be file shares. This could be iSCSI, fiber channel LUNs, whatever that may be, right? Whatever we can present to Veeam as local spinning disks to that specific Veeam backup and replication server. And then we have the capacity tier. So capacity tier is your typical 5,000-pound gorillas out there. In this particular case, it's Amazon and Azure. Now, we also have our newer tier, which was released with version 11, which is called archive tier. So let's just say you're in Amazon and you want to go to Glacier. Can you send your backups to Glacier? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we can absolutely send active fulls into Glacier. GFS, grandfather, father, son, right to Glacier. Same thing with like if you were using Azure, you could go Azure Blob Storage Archival tier, which is their cold tier. Now, one thing that you can't do as of today, you can't go from like Blob hot to Amazon Glacier cold or deep. And there's no cross compatibility as of today. I think that will be very well changing here with our next version, but that will be a little bit more to talk upon here a little bit later. All right, so I'm moving more into the nerdy side of the house. This is going to be continuous data protection, or what I refer to it as CDP. CDP is basically at the very foresight of this. This is what we're doing is we're minimizing data loss, but we're also speeding up the recovery time. So we're making that recovery point objective very, very small to make sure that, hey, if something happens, we can basically turn that virtual machine back on, and maybe you lose a minute, maybe 5 minutes worth of data comparatively to hours, or potentially, if you've never tested before, days, right? So that's a lot of good stuff here. So again, the next slide is going to get pretty nerdy here, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. So this is the CDP overview. So let me kind of break this down. This is where my true nerd really comes out. So I'm going to kind of work from the top to the side, and I'll try to do my best to tell you what side of the picture I'm on. So the very first thing I really want to go over is that very top guy. He's the CDP coordinator. Think of this guy as your top level manager. He's the guy telling everybody where to go. He rules everything, and he's basically the one in communication with vCenter and the replica resources, right? So again, big boss, where's the cool hat, tells everybody where to go. Cool. Now we have the source filter. Now this source filter, its main job is really to intercept the IO requests. So inbound calls for requests, right? There is basically what it's going to do is it's going to go through and manage those IO filters through a wizard. A lot of cool stuff there. Again, not going to get too much into the weeds. Now, Source Daemon. Source Daemon. Really, what I want you guys to get from this is he's really the traffic cop. He's telling everybody how fast they can go, how slow they can go, where they can go, and when they can go. So that's kind of the Source Daemon's power per se. And then we have the source proxy. This guy is the absolute workhorse for CDP. He is changing filters. He's updating them on RAM and disk size, and making sure that replica states are good, and making sure that side compression is good, along with encryption. This guy is just doing a lot of work all the time. And again, he's really the one carrying everybody around from that perspective. All right, only got 2 more, and then I'm done with this slide. So just hang on with me. The next one is going to be the target proxy. Now, this target proxy, what does it really do? The biggest thing that it's going to do is it's going to receive those blocks from the source proxy, and then just decompress and then de-encrypts those blocks, right? So it's ingesting, de-encrypting, and then basically de-encrypts that data. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on, and I swear this is it, last of the super nerdy stuff, is the target daemon in filter. This basically just completes everything. He writes the data stores, he filters anything that's like inactive in a failover state, and he's just kind of there to manage everything. Checklist guy, kind of a deal. All right, so again, that was the super nerdy stuff. I swear it's not going to get too much more nerdy going forward. So expanded instant recovery. Basically, what is this? This is just a great way to use our Veeam Explorer series to basically restore your specific application items, your specific verticals that you guys are looking for, SQL, Oracle, Exchange, databases, right? We have these specific ultra low RPOs that we have built for those. And the last thing I'll say here on my next one, and I'm not even going to talk to this slide very much. Really what I want to round out my portion with is version 12. So right now, today, we're on version 11. February 14th, however, Valentine's Day, everybody does get a little bit of a Valentine's Day present from Veeam. So I just want to note that there is some huge releases coming. Stay tuned from that. I think from the DevOps team, there is over 388 new additional features, upgrades, or product upgrades inside of the new console. There's tons of new facelifts. It's really going to be just a phenomenal release overall. So I wanted to kind of leave it with some good stuff that everybody has a Valentine's for the 14th. So if you didn't, now you do. Welcome to Veeam from that perspective. And at this point, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pass it over to one of our Platinum VCSP partners, pass it back over to Ian here, and he'll kind of take us through the rest of this webinar here.
Thank you, Michael. A little bit of background. I know we kind of just dove in and got into it, but you know, we've been working with Veeam now for we just hit our 9-year mark actually this month. So we've been very excited to work with Veeam, and we've seen a lot of evolution of the product. Yeah, it's been a solid product to work with, and even in the beginning, I mean, I think we were talking about, like, we were in version 2, and now we're going to 12. You know, we've seen that just customer feedback, right, coming through, and immutable backups were a big part of that. One of the reasons why was they ransomware groups figured out very quickly that they can infect data, and so in your mind you're like, okay, I have my data backed up somewhere else, and I'm following 321 to the T, but lo and behold, your data has been corrupted for months and months. And Michael alluded to that. I mean, they don't go in, you know, in one day. They stay there for months, and a lot of times weeks. I mean, there's a time horizon to it. It doesn't cost them any money to do this. A lot of it is automated as well, so it's not resource intensive for them, and they have the time to give. So they basically just wait. They wait until they get they infect, and then at that point, when they know they have you, is when they start making the ransomware petitions. So it's really good to see that evolution of product. A couple of things about PhoenixSnap. We ourselves have or what's called a web scaler. So we do a lot of infrastructure services at web scale. We're globally located. We're in 17 different markets, geo markets right now. We did start out of Phoenix, Arizona, but we quickly grew, and we're in the US, EU, and in parts of Asia Pac as well. And we have a lot of different availability. So some of the things that you get with us, everything that we do is OpEx based. So pay-per-use models. We don't usually require any kind of upfront money. Just everything we do is based on consumption models. As you use it, you pay for that service, and we work with you on business models that are flexible as well. Our support is 24/7. It's follow the sun. We have 4 support centers throughout the world, and we are always available of live chat, phone calls, emails, texts, different mechanisms. I mean, we're going to come out with Slack. We're doing Slack pilots right now for our customers that are more on the DevOps side, and we're going to be coming out with more Slack support as a general mechanism. We've seen quite a bit of good response there. Fast recovery. So a lot of things that we are able to do because we have a lot of web scale, we have a lot of infrastructure services. We're using Veeam as our software layer for backups predominantly. We are able to quickly restore data, and that's important. You know, we have different mechanisms for that. We have a lot of compute availability to be able to do those things, and that's only you don't do that at web scale. It's very hard for an enterprise to do that on their own, or very costly. We can make it available now to many. And then redundancy, we have a location across 6 globally distributed locations throughout the world. So we do make a lot of data availability and make that available to you. We're also in the market guide now for many years with Gartner for disaster recovery services. That's what we're well known within the Gartner ecosystem as a disaster recovery service provider is something we do well. And again, it makes sense because of all the compute that we've been doing for years and years, all the web scale that we've been doing, and it just makes it an easy mechanism. I do have actually something I want to bring up, and there is a I do like audience participation. So at the end, we will have a Q&A session, and we will have some prizes as giveaways. I want to mention that early in the conversation. You'll see the slide for that later on, but just so you can kind of think about a couple questions you may want to ask. The participation is great because we are doing some giveaways. We're gonna have an Amazon gift certificate. We're gonna 3, 2 for the most just good solid questions that are asked, and then 1 a random giveaway as well. So we'll have 3 to give away. But getting back to the Veeam backup and disaster recovery solution. So today, one of the distinguishing factors that we do is our systems are fully integrated with Veeam backup and recovery. So when you think of that 321 that was mentioned, a lot of clients run on-prem today, and we're able to be an endpoint for them. So that one side of the house, that off-site location, that's something that we do well. That's actually how we started engaging with Veeam early on, and it's a very easy way to interact with Veeam. It's literally a drop-down where we basically provide credentials, and within the Veeam UI, you just select PhoenixSnap and type in your credentials. That's it, and you can start doing backups to an offsite location like ours. Choose which location you want. We give you different options there. We are able to then do a couple different things here. So the draft solution with Veeam is pretty cool because we're able to give you virtual instance types. So you're able to have hardware infrastructure that is ready to go. We make that available in an OpEx model. We make it easy to consume. You're not paying for, basically you're paying for insurance at this point. I mean, it's hardware you have available to you, and you can do failover testing with that. It's fully built to bring up your application, and that's the one thing that I think we don't stress enough with Veeam. It's one thing to have the data, but when you really have the application support and you have the network stacks and all the other components that come along with having a fully built out application for your staff and for your business, it's really hard to replicate that and to do it well. And Veeam makes it very easy for that engagement and a very easy failover mechanism. So here's kind of our Veeam ecosystem, and we have different ways to work with Veeam, and also in all of these kind of build on top of each other. So Veeam Cloud Connect, we talked a little bit about, and that's really that offsite, that 321, that one side of the house. That's what we do well. That's how we started working with Veeam to basically provide offsite locations for Veeam customers. That's what we do, and we do that in OpEx model, very easy to engage. It's a small fee to get your data in play. We don't charge for any incoming bandwidth. And we have it available to you to basically have data that is stored offsite and also secured in a secured environment. Managed backup for Office 365. Again, a lot of emails are today in Office 365 is one of the biggest providers of emails today. Most customers used to do that before, used to run their own Exchange servers. A lot have moved over to O365 as an as-a-service product. So Veeam provides a good backup mechanism away from O365, actually outside of that, so that you can restore, because O365 by default doesn't give you any backups. I mean, you have a little bit of availability, but you can go back and years, you can go back and actually look for that one email you really needed, or if you have a massive loss of data in an Azure stack, you don't have that availability of services, and that's something that Veeam brought to the market because of demand, because it was seen as an Achilles heel really within Azure. It was not an availability of an easy way to restore backups that were needed for 365. So we have a great built product, and that's built on a per use basis. Really easy to also enable it, and again, we provide the offsite data source for that. Thinking about that 321, we're back to that one where that offsite location for that. Veeam disaster recovery, we talked about that a little bit, but really it's taking all of this Veeam data that you have and all this VMs that you have available to you, and being able to restore them in an environment and make it really easy couple of clicks buttons to be able to restore your entire environment and not have to pay for infrastructure that's just sitting there unused, so that we make it very easy and cost effective. And that's really what we're known in the market for inside Gartner. Again, we have been in the market guide for many years now. And then we have a flagship product called Data Security Cloud. And the reason why it's our flagship product, it's a VMware-based solution. So if you want to run your own VMware stacks within our environments, we supply a compliant-friendly solution around that, PCI, DSS, third-party audited, HIPAA controls around it, and we audit that constantly. There's edge protection as well built into it. But within that delivery of product, we made it a point to always have Veeam backups ready to go. And so if you want to back up to another one of our sites, you can do that in a very easy manner, and that's actually built into the product. And then if you want to recover from that, we also make it a very, very easy disaster recovery solution as well. So all these things kind of fall and work with each other, and they create a good posture for backup and recovery physical infrastructure that you can have throughout the world. Next slide, please. We do have a special promo running for anybody interested, and easy to get into, just sales@phoenixsnap.com, but 20% off Veeam Cloud Connect plus Insider Protection Bundle. Again, going back to what was shown from a technology perspective, really good way to make sure that your data is secured, it's offsite, it's immutable. We provide those services to you very easily, and it's a good part of a solution for ransomware attacks. It's kind of key to have that data, to make sure the data is secure and that you can rely on that data. And again, we're offering a promo bundle. If there's any interest, it's available to you. And the easiest way to get that is just sales@phoenixsnap.com. Next slide, please. So one more poll question, last one for the day. And again, just for audience participation, and we'd like to share that data as well. We'll make that available, also post videos that are available. Would you like to talk to PhoenixSnap about your backup and disaster recovery strategy? And I'm going to leave that open for Q&A now. So if you don't mind, any questions, just put in your chat window, and we'll start asking them as they come in. And so I'm saying get a couple here. So this might be this one's a little bit more for Michael. Can you explain what type of reporting tools are available in Veeam replication?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Veeam reporting, actually built in, we're going to have like inside of Veeam backup and replication, there is some reporting. Now, will that give you all the kind of insights that you're going to need? Most likely not. That's where we're going to kind of talk more about Veeam 1, and that's where I was kind of talking about earlier, where you have that, it's the conglomerate of that interface where you can get Visio diagrams, you can get under and overused virtual machines. So Veeam 1, I would say, is probably a really good starting point from that perspective. If you really want something that's just a behemoth in what it does in monitoring and analytics, that's exactly kind of what Veeam 1 is more tenured to, and especially if you're into looking at the the fine-tooth comb details, ingress and degress, different layers of connection. It really gives you an abstract layer to look at your data center or workloads more specifically, and know health states across the board, and really kind of have that single pane of glass to make sure everything is running smoothly.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And I actually have a really good question, and it's a little bit of a left field question, but I think it's really good. The first one is, what's the role of AI in fast learning chatbots if used as part of an attack vector in the RaaS ecosystem? And so I think that's more open to either you or I or both. But I think that's a really good question, actually. So definitely, if you think of ChatGPT and some of the other tools that are becoming available, right? There's been I think a more mass market increase in just commoditization of AI, and we'll see that. We'll continue to see that, and we will see that as a delivery mechanism. I mean, I think that's being used right now in a small part, but anything an affiliate can do to get the distribution network up faster and create a new attack vector, they're going to be game for it. I mean, we're going to see more breaches happening and more information happening that way. But at the same time, we're also it's always a leapfrog approach, right? You see new attack vectors come in, and then the security suppliers then figure out ways to block that. So, and rinse and repeat all over again, right? It's always a continuing battle. So I do believe that's going to be more part of the attack vector ecosystem. I think we're seeing a little bit of it right now. I mean, it's not as advanced. The availability is just not there. It is very compute intensive. But as these tools become more commoditized and more mass market, it's just another potential way to exploit. So we will definitely see that. Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I think I'm going to chime in right just along with you. Is if we're at this like cusp of where ChatGPT 3 and kind of a lot of these other AI platforms are really kind of starting to become more public knowledge, right? These have kind of been in DevOps hands for many years, and these are now more coming more publicly facing. So yeah, I think you're right. I think we'll definitely see this type of attack vector go up. But the cool thing is with something where it's AI driven, there's a lot of signatures. There's a lot of leaky trails to exactly kind of where it goes to. And I think Ian hit the nail on the head. Is yeah, we're going to see some new technology, some new immersing technology come out, but you only see that right before the security analytics and all the security teams go, hey, that's how we're going to fix that from now on. And of course, there's going to be kind of some trial and tribulation, but that for the most part I do see that in the roadmap as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then there was the second part of that question, which is, do cybersecurity defense fundamentals change accordingly, or do they remain the same? And I would say it depends, right? The cybersecurity defense fundamentals don't change, but the actual again, a new attack vector, you have to adapt yourself, right? We didn't even get into like the whole container or different ways to develop applications right now. But there's a whole ecosystem around that creates new vectors all day long, right? The actual the fundamentals themselves are still the same, meaning it is a layered approach, having backups in place, having all these key components still remain the same. So the fundamentals are the same, but the way you interact with them are very different. So when your application, for example, is no longer a monolithic application and it's distributed and it's not clearly defined what the application actually is, because it covers so many containers and so many different pieces of microservices, then it becomes a really hard beast to wrangle in. And so you have to have software that's very smart and aware of these things. And so the adaptation and the execution is different. So I would say the fundamentals remain the same, but the execution is going to be different. That's just true. It's been like this the whole time, right? As new technologies evolve and they become new attack vectors at that point. There's another question associated. So what makes the backups immutable? If they sit dormant for months or longer, and could it be in the backups with a 0-day? So I'm gonna give that one to you, Michael.
Yeah, of course. So that's a really good question. So basically, how do we make sure that if you do back up some type of nasty Trojan horse, some type of bad logic, ransomware, whatever specific strain that is, right? How do we make sure that 3, 6 months, 9 months down the road, when I go to restore from that specific backup, it's still good? And that comes down to testing. I will say this. I haven't said it enough on this webinar, but I yell about testing for the most of my life, especially being an admin. I can't tell you the amount of times that testing can save so many hours and so much time that it's ridiculous. It's one of the steps that I feel like is overlooked a lot. Everybody always has the good step forward saying, I always want to test, I always gonna test, but do they test? And that usually is the key, is if they do it. And this all kind of rounds about going back to the Sure Backup side. So Sure Backup is an isolated lab. This isolated lab is going to do a couple different things: heartbeat test, ping test, application test, but it also is going to do another big one, which is also going to do an AV scan. So if there is something lingering in there, we find it, we don't push that up to the other repositories. We can now segregate that piece of data and immediately get to work on action items, trying to figure out how long this exploit has been in there, getting forensics teams and everything else in place before the button has been pressed. So there's a couple ways to mitigate against that, and that's all going to kind of come down to Sure Backup.
Thank you. And then a couple more questions as we wrap up. Is this solution appropriate for the retention requirements of a government client? And I'll answer that. I mean, Veeam has been has been servicing the government space for many years, so the answer is yes. But Michael, if you want to elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a simple answer of yes. It comes down to retention policy. One thing with Veeam is we're never holding your data hostage, by far, anytime at all. So if you want to keep your data for 1 week, 1 year, 10 years, or 100 years, we do not care. That is completely upon you and your entity and how long you want to keep that. You literally mark the time frame or the year mark that you want, 20, 25, 30 years, and you set it, you forget it, and it's just going to be there for you to do your restores. So yeah, absolutely. Government, DoD, DOJ, all those big entities we've been working with hand in glove for very, very long time. So
yeah, agreed. And the final question is an easy one, and just a general one, which is, will this webinar be recorded and available? I mentioned that quickly. So the answer is yes, this will be recorded and available. So if you want to pass it along or just review some of the key points that were covered, our team will make that easily available for everybody on our YouTube channel, and also via distribution methods as we round out post